In the year 1491, as Europe simmered with dynasties, ambition, and war, a boy was born in the Palace of Placentia at Greenwich. His name was Henry Tudor. He was not the heir, but the spare, the second son of King Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. Henry's destiny seemed modest compared to that of his elder brother, Prince Arthur, but fate had other plans. Young Henry grew up in privilege and protection. While Arthur was prepared to rule, Henry immersed himself in music, theology, languages, and sport. He was handsome, charismatic, and dazzling in intellect, a golden boy born to be admired, not burdened with governance. But destiny is rarely polite. In 1502, Prince Arthur died suddenly, and at age 11, Henry became the new heir to the throne of England. 7 years later, in 1509, King Henry VII died. At just 17, Henry VIII ascended the throne. The kingdom rejoiced. A new king, a new era. Henry was everything his people dreamed of. Strong, athletic, chivalrous, and devout. He was the Renaissance king. He jousted, he composed music, he debated scripture. He was a poet and a warrior. And he married quickly, taking his late brother's widow, Catherine of Aragon, as his queen. The marriage had the blessing of the Pope, and for many years it seemed a happy union. But beneath the splendor and pageantry, trouble brewed. Henry's greatest obsession was not glory nor wealth, but a male heir, a son to continue the Tudor dynasty. Catherine bore him several children, but only one survived infancy, a daughter, Mary. The Tudor line, so fragile, so recently won in the Wars of the Roses, stood on shaky ground. Henry waited and waited, but no son came. His eyes began to wander, not just toward another woman, but toward a vision of England that would change the world. Enter Anne Boleyn, clever, sophisticated, and calculating. She refused to become Henry's mistress. If he wanted her, he would have to make her queen. And so began one of the most dramatic religious and political schisms in European history. Henry petitioned the Pope for an annulment of his marriage to Catherine, citing biblical passages and conscience. But the Pope, under pressure from Catherine's powerful nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, refused. Henry, furious and desperate, did what no English king had dared before. He broke from Rome. In 1534, the Act of Supremacy was passed, declaring Henry the supreme head of the Church of England. Priests who refused to acknowledge him were executed. Monasteries were dissolved. Catholic lands and wealth were seized. The English Reformation had begun, not out of faith, but out of lust and the hunger for a son. He married Anne Boleyn in secret. She was crowned queen. But instead of a prince, Anne gave birth to another daughter, Elizabeth. Henry was enraged. Anne's fate was sealed. In 1536, just 3 years after their marriage, Anne Boleyn was arrested on charges of adultery, incest, and treason, most of them fabricated. She was tried and executed by sword at the Tower of London. Her head fell, and the very next day, Henry became engaged to Jane Seymour. Jane gave Henry his long-desired son, Edward, but she died shortly after childbirth. Henry mourned her more than any other wife. She would be the only queen buried beside him. But Henry could not stay alone. In 1540, he agreed to marry Anne of Cleves, a German princess, for diplomatic reasons. But when Henry saw her in person, he claimed she was unattractive and called her the Flanders mare. The marriage was annulled within months. Anne, however, kept her head and was given a generous settlement, living out her days in peace. Next came Catherine Howard, a vivacious teenager, more than 30 years Henry's junior. Enchanted by her youth and charm, Henry called her his rose without a thorn. But Catherine's past and her reckless affairs caught up with her. She was executed for adultery in 1542. Finally, in 1543, Henry married Catherine Parr, a learned and diplomatic widow. She was more nurse than lover, caring for the aging king as his health deteriorated. Henry VIII was no longer the golden prince of his youth. By his 50s, he was obese. Some say over 350 pounds. His legs were ulcerated and infected. He could barely walk. His mood was volatile, his trust eroded. The once vibrant king had become a tyrant, suspicious, brutal, and consumed by pain. He suffered from what modern historians believe was type 2 diabetes, gout, and possibly Cushing's syndrome or McLeod syndrome, a condition that may explain his paranoia, swelling, and mood swings. His leg wounds oozed, and his courtiers had to carry him in a reinforced chair. His armor had to be custom-made to his ever-expanding frame. He became a man imprisoned in flesh and fury, and still he ruled. Under Henry's reign, England was transformed. The monasteries were dissolved, enriching the crown, but uprooting centuries of Catholic life. The English navy was vastly expanded, laying the foundation for future empire. The power of the monarchy increased, but so did its dangers. To oppose the king was death. He had many loyal servants until he didn't. Thomas More, Thomas Cromwell, Cardinal Wolsey, all rose high, and most fell hard. Henry ruled not just with a scepter, but with the axe. In total, he married 6 women. He executed 2 of them. He had 3 legitimate children, Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward, each from a different mother. All 3 would eventually rule England. On January 28, 1547, King Henry VIII died at the age of 55. He left behind a kingdom forever altered, a church broken from Rome, a treasury richer, but a conscience poorer, and a dynasty on the brink of chaos. He was buried beside Jane Seymour at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. His tomb was modest compared to his ambition. There was no great epitaph, no final word. His body, swollen and rotting, reportedly burst before burial. A final indignity for a man once seen as God's anointed on earth. And yet, his legacy endures. Henry VIII is remembered as a tyrant, a lover, a reformer, and a destroyer. He tore England from the Pope, shattered monasteries, and reshaped Europe because he could not have a son, because he could not be denied. 6 wives, thousands of executions, a new church, a fractured nation. One name that history will never forget, Henry VIII. We